This episode of the Range Minded Podcast, we talk about the crazy week that's been going on in the country. Man, we got an awesome ruling from the Supreme Court, and then we got a crazy bill that came down from the Senate and absolutely quickly signed by the president. We're going to go through that, maybe a little bit more on this episode of the Range Minded Podcast. I'm calling this Rulings and Bills. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Range Minded Podcast. My name is Steve Zimmerman. Again, I'm flying solo. Let's talk about real quick. If you know anything about Nick, you'll know that he's an extremely busy man. He's actually been on, I guess you could call it a crusade over the last little bit. And if you're not following Nick on his Instagram feed, Nick Hoffer, the Holster Guy, or Hoftech Industries, any of those will get you to Nick. And he's been doing an Instagram live every day for the last month and a half now. On top of the stuff he's already doing, he's been extremely busy. He's been trying to focus, like laser focus, on some things that he's trying to get going. And I cannot blame him for that one bit. So again, I'm flying solo. It is what it is. You get what you get, and hopefully you enjoy today's show. I wanted to read this very first thing right off the bat, and hopefully this sounds familiar. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now that should sound very familiar to you, especially our longtime listeners. Maybe we have some new listeners that just happened across the show. That would be the Second Amendment. Okay. We know that the Bill of Rights is an extremely important document to this great country. What the Constitution does, that we have now, hopefully still in effect, it does not grant the rights to its citizens. And if you've been taught that in school, or if you've been led to believe that over the last little while, I know many people think that the Constitution grants rights to the citizens. It does not. What the Constitution does do, however, is it limits the ability of the government to remove those rights of its citizens. Now you need to look at the amendments written in the Bill of Rights with that purview, that they are written as a limit to the federal government. I would highly encourage, if you haven't yet, find you a copy of the Federalist Papers. Do some research on why our founding documents are written the way they are, were written by whom they were written, and kind of the basis behind the Constitution altogether. I really feel like civics classes are falling short tremendously with our youth, and maybe some of you that have recently graduated colleges or whatever. I know with my kids, there are bits and pieces that have been left out or omitted in the lessons that they're being taught in schools, or twisted in a way that its whole content is not quite there. Okay? Now I'm going to read you this. I don't have this one memorized, so I do have to read it. And I did read the Second Amendment to make sure I got everything in the right place, in the right order. So, here's this. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, and the person or things to be seized. Okay, that's the Fourth Amendment. Hopefully you guys recognize that. Basically, that says what? That there must be a warrant, and the people, meaning us, we have the right against unreasonable searches and seizures, meaning the government just can't come in and take whatever they want because they think it's bad or scary or whatever. They must have a warrant and they must have probable cause and a reason to be there, not just because somebody doesn't like something that you said, or maybe you have a scary gun or whatever. Okay? Why did I bring these two things up? Unless you've had your head in a hole, not the other way around, over the last few weeks or couple weeks, I guess. Just, man, was it all just this last week? I guess it was. There's been a lot of things going on in the country. We in the Second Amendment community or Constitution community, whatever you want to call it, we had a big win. And hopefully you paid attention to it. So the Supreme Court has been dropping rulings a lot over the past 7 days. In fact, they added Friday to their release days because they've had a lot of stuff going on. Now, a lot of the stuff they've been dropping is pretty boring. I don't know. I guess to the people that have had their cases heard before the Supreme Court, it wasn't boring. But to the general populace, there's been nothing of great importance with the majority of those rulings that have come out. Sure, there's things that are going to influence constitutional law, so I guess they're all important if they get in front of the Supreme Court. One case in particular is the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen, who is the superintendent of the New York Police Department, State Police Department. So I'm not going to read this entire ruling here. If you really feel like reading a lot, there is I think it's 135 pages. And I'm not going to read that because that makes for a terribly boring show, and it's already boring enough. But there are some really important things that came up. So let's go through some of these real quick. I didn't mark these down very close, but Heller was cited, and if you haven't really, we talked about Heller a long time ago. One of the first shows that we talked about, we brought DC versus Heller up, and that is a monumental case. In fact, this is the most important, most prominent pro-gun ruling since Heller. So it's been 15 years, I think it's been, since we've had an important pro-Constitution, pro-Second Amendment ruling from the Supreme Court. Now, like I said, Heller gets cited a lot in this case, and basically what it does in Heller, Scalia pointed out that previously we've used a two-step system, or the courts or whatever have been using a two-step system to grant rights, and he says straight up that that's wrong. The Constitution is clear, the Second Amendment is clear, and it either meets the criteria written in the Second Amendment or the law does not. And if it does not meet that criteria, then it can be it's not supported under the Second Amendment. So, what do we learn from this Bruen case? Primarily, this case was brought up because it was there was an issue with people trying to get their concealed weapons permit, and New York State was basically a pay-to-play state. A lot of everyday people trying to exercise their right to self-defense were unable to get a permit because they couldn't prove justifiable cause of having one, or a good reason to have one. And so they were kind of getting pushed by the wayside. Yet, high-profile politicians, people with lots of money, famous people, whatever, athletes, they were able to, you know, slip a little extra dimes underneath that permit paperwork and suddenly have their permit. So you had to be of the cool kids crowd to be able to have a permit, or it was extremely difficult otherwise for you to be able to defend yourself under the state law to have a permit. Obviously, it took quite a while for this to get to the Supreme Court level. We were hoping to hear this ruling far before, a couple days ago when it came out. I'm actually not surprised that the court held this opinion up until the last couple days of their session. And I do think the timing is pretty interesting, honestly. And maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. So now we see that the Supreme Court says, hey, you cannot, you can't do this anymore. You have to allow people the right. Oh, come on, computer. Sorry about that. Hello. I've had an Apple for a while now, and now I still can't figure out how to run the stupid thing. So, the court said that it violates the Constitution to have the ban on their concealed weapons permit. Now, we think it just necessarily means to New York. But what that does is it will effectively eliminate all the may issue states and turn them into shall issue states. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. In fact, there's already a lot of states that are, excuse me, hope you didn't hear that burp. Pardon me. There's already many states and the usual players working on some state legislation to try and figure out how to navigate this new ruling. In fact, President Biden said that it was a disgusting miscarriage of justice, that the court's gone rogue and all this crazy stuff, calling the ruling illegitimate, which is dangerous and disgusting. It that shouldn't be said by the President of the United States to start with, okay? I don't care if it's Trump. I don't care if it was Bush or Obama, whoever it was. I don't care. There's no reason to basically incite violence. I think that's basically what he's doing, some of his comments about this ruling. Anyway, so it turns all those may issue states into shall issue states nationwide. It's going to take some time for that to happen. It's kind of interesting how. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's say why I think is kind of interesting that they dropped this ruling when they did. And this could just be mere coincidence. I thought it was interesting that they brought this ruling out before they brought the Dobbs or whatever, the Roe versus Wade, the abortion case. Now, pro-life, pro-choice, whatever, that's up to you. I will say this, and this is not going to be an abortion case podcast. I will say this. It's not illegal. They brought it back to states to make that determination. The states that are doing a ton of abortions will keep doing a ton of abortions, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, we're not going to talk about that anymore. You don't have to like my opinion. That's fine. I don't care. But we're adults, and we can have differing opinions, and we can get on with our lives without being miserable pukes. Okay? Done. So I thought it was interesting that they brought that gun ruling out before the Dobbs ruling. Like I say, that might have been just mere coincidence or whatever. Why do I say that? Because we saw the amount of fervor from the extreme left, violent left-wing protesters and stuff. And maybe the court did this, and now this is clear speculation. Maybe the court did this with the concealed carry stuff to say, hey, we believe that you have absolutely, the Constitution says that you have the right to defend yourself, and and this next case ruling is why. Maybe, maybe not. So it was a major win, nonetheless, a major win for the pro-gun community, the pro-Second Amendment community, to say, hey, the court still has our back. And this opens the door for many, many other, hopefully, many other rulings to come. We still have the bump stock thing, the armrest thing. There's a ton of other cases that are trying to filter up to the Supreme Court. There's the handgun roster from California that's now has the ability to trickle up again to the Supreme Court. Magazine bans, we've hashed this out so much already. This stuff's going to make it to the Supreme Court, hopefully, and as long as the makeup of the court doesn't change, I really do feel that the Supreme Court is a constitutional Supreme Court. They've made some rulings that maybe I don't agree with, but that's okay. I don't want to have a court that only one side of the political aisle agrees with the entire time. That's tyrannical. That's wrong. We have to be challenged on both sides of the aisle too. That's how the system works. Okay, I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Now, we think it's awesome. We think it's great. Woohoo! We had a great pro gun win until what happened. I think it was the very next day. We had the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. I'll be straight up with you. I was highly disappointed with the way a lot of the Republicans acted. Up until recently. Now, I'm not a traitor to the Second Amendment. I still think that the 15 senators that voted for this are pieces of human excrement. I think they're squishy. I think they're worthless, and I don't think they know how to lead. I think they know how to collect a paycheck from special interest groups, which are not the NRA. I think they're garbage. But I did do a little bit more research into this bill, and there are, believe it or not, you need to read it yourself, but there actually are a couple of things that I could agree with. And I didn't think I would say that until tonight when I was doing some research on it. And let's talk about it. So the first thing I found was this statement from, well, actually it was from the president's desk. The statement of administration policy. This was dated June 23rd, 2022 from the Senate. And I'm going to try and read it without fumbling through it. I don't want to read the whole thing. It's too damn boring. Basically, it's just kind of a bird's eye view of what's in this bill. And it did say right off the bat, the administration strongly supports the passage of Senate Bill 2938, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Now, this act was written, or this bill was composed right after we had some unfortunate shooting events, mass murders. I'm not going to just say shooting events. They were mass murders carried out by assholes that just wanted to murder somebody. And the problem is this was a knee-jerk reaction that we must do something. And every time there's a tragedy, especially involving somebody using a gun, the we must do something crowd pops up extremely loud. And they didn't write this bill right after that happened. No, this stuff has been drafted way before that. So when a tragedy happens, they can jump right in with answers right away before anybody has time to analyze anything or process anything and come up with real answers. This crap has been drafted for years. Don't fool yourselves thinking that these idiots are smart enough to come up with something, a 200-page bill, in just, a day. That's BS. Quit fooling yourself. They work on these bills in their little offices to bring out whenever there's a tragedy. They are definitely the ambulance chasers of the Senate. So anyway, it kind of compromises what's in this bill. like I said, there actually is some stuff that might be a good thing. Other than it costs a lot of money, which this president has no problem spending our money uh, on everything but domestic independence of energy. So there's $250 million set aside for mental health services, which I think I'm okay with. We know there's a big problem with mental health problems, mental health issues in the country. Obviously, anybody that mass murders people has a mental health issue. But what it doesn't talk about, or what they don't point out, is what they're doing to um. Oh, how do I put this? There's nothing about how they're going to prevent stuff from happening. What happens if somebody sees signs? And maybe that's in this. This is, like I say, this is just an overview of what's in the bill. Um, but there is a 250 mil set aside for community mental health services. Now, this could be a backdoor to something else, which this bill also goes into red flag laws, which we'll get into a little bit later. And maybe these mental health services are meant to profile people that may have some mental issues in the future. Not will or do, but may. There's also some money set aside for um, community things for kids to do after school, before school, summertime stuff. Which honestly, we don't need the federal government to pay for that. Your community school should be already doing that without without any federal funding. The problem is a lot of this money, um, it gets tied up with other things. So if you want, if as a state boards of education, if you want something in your schools in your state, it's kind of lumped in with some of this other stuff. If you want this other funding, you have to implement these things that are in this bill. There's another $300 million for training for educators and school staff, um, to help prevent violence or respond to violence in their schools. Which, again, I'm okay with that to an extent, but it doesn't. Now, I haven't read the whole bill. To be fair, I haven't read every page of this bill, which is another, many, many, many boring pages. But there is some stuff that makes, at least on the surface, makes a little bit of sense to me. There's other things that it does not include, thankfully. They said straight up that the president wanted more in this bill that did not get included. So I pulled up, now I got to find it here, a New York Times article, which I actually found interesting, even though the New York Times is parakeet carpet. But it went through, gosh, there's just so, you know what I hate about getting on the internet and looking at some of these bigwig sites? It's just all the stupid ads. I don't give a damn about half the stuff that's on here. All right, so here's what's in the Senate bill. This was from the New York Times, June 23rd. So 3 days ago from today's the 26th when I recorded this. So 15 Republicans crossed lines, and I just love how the New York Times puts stuff. If it wasn't for the pesky Republicans and only 15 had common sense, if only more, we could have done so much more. So it goes through the title of their little article is "Here's what's in the Senate bill and what's left out." So if you want to jump in on that, and I know I keep saying I'm going to tag this stuff in the show notes. You guys know by now I'm too damn lazy to do that. So be big, kids. Remember how it used to be when we have to actually research stuff and educate ourselves. You don't have to depend on me for knowledge, because I know I'm not the best purveyor of knowledge. So you should probably do your own homework and educate yourself on this stuff. Anyway, let's jump back to the New York Times. So it's funny that, let's do this. So one of the most important things that's in the bill, this is one of the very first thing they talk about in this article, is enhanced background checks for young gun buyers, which I think is, I don't know. I don't know the point. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to allow juvenile records, which I don't even know how this falls within inside of HIPAA laws, like how this is even doable. But whatever, they're the smart people, right? It says juvenile records, including those regarding mental health, uh, would for the first time be required in a criminal background check for prospective gun buyers under the age of 21, and the authorities will have more time to conduct the background check. So, in this case, for buyers of firearms between 18 to 20, they have to wait 10 days. Now, under federal law, uh, the government has 3 days to do your background check, and after 3 days, if there's no resolve to that background check, as a seller, we can sell that gun after 3 days if we don't hear back. Now, for 18 to 20-year-olds, they have to wait 10 days, which, whatever. If a kid lives in the inner city and he's worried about something, he's not going to go to the gun store and wait 10 days. He's just going to find a gun on the street or steal one from his buddy's dad or whatever. So under this legislation, federal authorities will have to check with local law enforcement to review the state record to determine whether the prospective buyer, as a juvenile, if he has some kind of he or she has a criminal history or mental health problems that would disqualify them for the purchase. And then that information will be turned over to the FBI for further investigation. And that's where the 10 days is going to take. I really don't know how that falls under the federal guidelines that are already set forth, but I guess we'll figure it out. Now, that was the very first thing that they showed was in the bill, and now the New York Times has to complain a little bit. Here's what's left out, according to the New York Times. The proposal falls short from the legislation that has passed the House that would ban anyone under the age of 21 from buying a semi-automatic weapon. What does it matter if they can buy a semi-auto? A 1022 is a semi-auto. Almost every handgun on the market is semi-automatic. There are hunting rifles that are semi-automatic. There are shotguns that run off semi-automatic. It just shows you how ignorant the people writing this bill are. And in reality, this is a little window into their souls. They don't want any of us to have semi-automatic anything, because in their purview, semi-automatic is just as scary as fully automatic, even though they do not operate the same, which I know you guys know. Democrats also agreed, the Times goes on, to allow the enhanced background check requirement for younger buyers to expire after 10 days, leaving the... sorry, I read that wrong. So this has a window of closure. So this expanded background check only lasts for 10 years, a lot like the assault weapons ban in 1994, the Clinton, which Biden had a lot to do with back then too, by the way. So it is going to sunset in 10 years. So it's just kicking the can down, which we know Republicans and Democrats are so great at kicking the can down the road. They want the paycheck. They just don't want any responsibility. As a boss, when I was full on managing the store there in Boise, that shit don't fly. You cannot be a manager and boss people around and expect everything in return. That don't work in the real world. I don't know about your guys' lives. If you walked into your boss and said, "Hey, I want a raise, but I don't want to do anything for it," especially in this economy, chances are you're going to get the pink slip and you're going to be standing in a line for another job. All right. Another thing that is in the bill, which is not cool, is the expansion of red flag laws. Now, remember when I read the Fourth Amendment at the beginning of the show? This absolutely violates the Second Amendment, the Second and the Fourth Amendment. So there is $750 million, $750 million in federal money going to the states to create red flag laws. Now they call it temporary confiscation here in the New York Times, but I want you guys to do a little newsroom chase of your own. Do some research and look at some of the places that have already done red flag laws. Hurricane Katrina, that was basically, I know it wasn't quite the same thing, but the government came in and took everybody's guns, and those people, lawful citizens, many of them never got their guns back. They were never compensated. They were just led on a wild goose chase, and they just lost their guns. I know that's a little bit different. That's a state of emergency, but it kind of points to how competent the government is. Here in the state of Idaho, I'm pretty sure there was somewhat of a red flag law that was enacted on a veteran. It didn't end well for the veteran. There's a lot of stuff. Just do some research. I'm telling you, I'm not just hyperbolic about this. There are examples out there of people getting shot over red flag laws. Look at the Fourth Amendment again, and then tell me how red flag laws are legal. Okay, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. It will lead to abuse. Now, this bill does have a provision for abuse, which is good as long as it gets enforced, because this is a problem. Now, we understand that people with mental illness. I don't want to just point to veterans with PTSD, but it's real. I mean, there's folks that have issues that maybe shouldn't have guns for a little while. There's other opportunities and other avenues for that, and especially, here's a little disclaimer: if you see your buddy going through some hard times, and you know there's some depression, you know there's some big problems, don't be scared to talk to him about it. Say, hey man, you want me to hold on to your guns? You can come get them anytime, but I can hold on to your guns for a little while. And that's okay. There are some services nationwide that do that as a service, to not just veterans, but to other people that may be going through some hard times. That goes back to being a good friend, a good citizen, and a good steward of the Second Amendment. When you know somebody's having a hard time, it's okay to ask questions and help them out. Don't be a dick about it. It's okay. Anyway, so there's $750 million for states to draft red flag laws. I guess I gotta be careful. Freudian slip in there. Now the Democrats, they wanted to go a little bit further. They wanted federal red flag laws in this bill. They wanted the feds to be able to come in and to be able to confiscate guns. Now, I don't know about you, but if you look at the way the post office is ran, the way Amtrak is ran, the way a lot of the now health insurance is ran, you tell me that you have confidence in the federal government to be able to keep track, to store safely, to take care of our property? No, I don't trust them. You know, they're going to screw it up, and they are really good at screwing things up. Luckily, that was taken out of this bill, for now. Another thing that I find kind of stupid is the boyfriend loophole. A straw purchase is a straw purchase. If a dating couple, I think that's what it says in here, the dating couple or whatever. If a girlfriend's buying a gun for a boyfriend that can't have a gun, that's a straw purchase. That's a felony, a federal crime. It's already a law. There are over 20,000 gun laws on the books between state and federal. A lot of the stuff is already covered, but they're just looking at more reasons to restrict our rights instead of letting the Constitution do its job. With this boyfriend loophole, the Democrats wanted a prohibition on this a little bit more. They want to, and it's already, if they would look at the 4473, a lot of the stuff is already, if you answer the questions wrong, you're disqualified on stuff that already exists on the 4473. Now it's, if you're a first time offender of a violent misdemeanor, let's see, let's read this together, because I actually must have skimmed over this part. Democrats wanted a blanket prohibition, but on negotiations with Republicans, they agreed to allow some offenders to regain the ability to purchase a gun if a person is a first-time offender and the crime is a violent misdemeanor. The ban would disappear 5 years after the end of the criminal sentence, so long as they did not commit further violent crimes. Negotiators also agreed not to make the provision retroactive, bowing to another demand by the Republicans. Now, I have a hard time seeing these 15 Republicans demanding anything but another soda or a donut or something, because they're so worthless. All right, so this is something, like I say, I don't necessarily disagree with. Not that part, but this next thing we're going to be talking about, I don't necessarily disagree with, but I'm concerned on the avenue of how this is going to happen. Funding for mental health and school safety. The New York Times, again, quoting, the bill would allocate billions, like our government has billions of dollars to spend, billions of dollars to schools and communities to expand mental health programs. The funding also aims to boost school safety, which we can have a warm and fuzzy about. The bill grants $300 million over the next 5 years for school safety programs targeting violence that would fund school resource officers to beef up security in schools. Why don't we just arm teachers? I know in our school district, the teachers can buy their own guns. Me, for one, as a trainer, I would be happy to teach these teachers for free. That's so far zero money out of the pockets of the school district in this area. Look at that. I would have saved a bunch of money for the school already. Anyway, in addition to funding, funding would go to training school personnel and adults who interact with minors to respond to mental health issues. That doesn't sound so bad. But here we go. The New York Times has to bitch a little bit. Republicans insisted on keeping the cost of the bill as low as possible. The total measure would only cost $13.2 billion. That's a lot of dough. The bill also goes into tougher penalties on straw purchases. We already have bills against or laws against straw purchases. A very, very small percentage, I think we talked about it in one of the other shows, a very small percentage of gun crimes are done with guns that are purchased. I think it was 98%, 98.6% or something of gun crimes are done with stolen guns. So this would do very, very little. What they're trying to say is, well, we don't want, these straw purchases, and I'm surprised they didn't address the gun show loophole, which is one of their favorite fallacies. Anyway, whatever. So the bill would escalate the penalty of 15 years from 15 to 25 years for a straw purchase. Whatever. It's a federal crime. They're going to go if they get caught anyways. Here we go. What was left out? The bill does not include more sweeping measures to impose universal background checks or the ban on sale of large capacity magazines. Republicans also said they refused to consider any mandatory waiting period for gun sales or a license requirement to purchase an assault weapon. Those scary assault. Oh, let me do it this way. An assault weapon. Sorry, playing with the echo. What is an assault weapon? That's just a fantasy term for anything they determine is scary. Thankfully, we didn't lose standard capacity magazine. They are not large capacity magazines. Sure, I guess you can say the D60 from Magpul is a large capacity, but 30-round magazines come with any AR I purchase. That is a standard capacity magazine. So up yours, politicians. Um, and luckily, so this is important. So we didn't really hear anything about these universal background checks. Okay, I guess we did a little bit. That is a red herring, straight up out of the gate, a red herring. What is a universal background check? Maybe you guys don't understand this. Let's talk about it. Anytime a gun changes possession from one person to another, and I mean anytime a gun changes possession, we would have to do a background check on that gun. So, say my buddy Grant wants to borrow one of my hunting rifles to go do whatever. We would have to go to an FFL. We'd have to fill out a 4473. He would have to go through a background check. That background check goes to the NCIS, the National Instant Check System. They look at the names from where the gun is going from. The transfer and transferee, they look at those names. That gets recorded. That background check comes back. Okay, we know that Grant now has this gun. Now Grant's done with his one-day hunting trip, and obviously I want my gun back. Now we have to go back to the FFL, fill out the 4473. The process takes place again, and the government now sees that Grant transferred the gun back to me. Now we have this huge chain of custody. This universal background check is a pseudo gun registry. That is not hyperbolic. That is fact. And that should scare the ever-living daylights out of you. It is not the government's job to know anything that we own. They already do anyways. They tinfoil hat time. They see what we purchase. The IRS sees what we spend, where that money goes. They know how much we get paid. And I'm pretty sure they could figure out what's in my bank account. It should be pretty easy because the number's 0. So this is a red herring. At least those squishy Republicans kept universal background checks out for now. That is dangerous, folks. Universal background checks are not some benign thing. It is a pseudo gun registry. Now, the large capacity magazine ban. My hell. Do you think those kids in Columbine only had one magazine? Do you think that asshole in Uvalde only had one magazine? Doesn't matter. That guy had hours. Hours to do what he wanted to do. He had plenty of magazines. It wouldn't have mattered if he had 310 round magazines. Do the math. That's a bullshit argument. Pardon my French. I get a little heated about this stuff. Mandatory waiting periods. Okay. You tell me what states have already done this stuff. There are states that this stuff has been an experiment in already. California. Well, Chicago, Illinois. New York. You tell me how good these gun control bills are already doing. This stuff already exists in those states. Do they have zero gun crime? Is it a safe haven of a utopia of peace? Last time I checked, the majority of problems with gun crime happens in cities and states where this stuff's already enacted. It is not that hard to see the problem. An armed society is a polite society. It is not the wild, wild west. They're already talking. We go back to that pro-gun bill. There are already people freaking out saying, "Oh, it's going to be like the wild, wild west. There's going to be shootouts every day. People are going to die." Maybe, but the more the bad guys end up dead, the less they reoffend. You can see this in nature. Look at a porcupine what's its defense? All those quills, right? You've seen pictures of dogs. If you've ever had a dog attack a porcupine, what happens? The dog comes home with a face full of quills. How about a skunk? We know its defense mechanism. They stink. Is it an appetizing smell? No. What about a rattlesnake? What about a rhinoceros? We see this in nature. Animals that have a defense mechanism are less likely to be attacked. I grew up with chickens. My brother had a bunch of chickens. The neighbor dogs came and attacked all of his chickens one day, killed a whole bunch of them. Did the chickens have a defense? Nope. They were easy targets. It's not rocket surgery, as one president used to say. Actually, I don't even know if Bush ever even said that. That might have even been a Saturday Night Live skit. It wouldn't surprise. Well, honestly, this might hurt some of your feelings. Bush was an idiot, anyways. Man, that guy screwed some of us out of important liberties. Just so you guys know. Honestly, both parties are taking us to the same place. One's just getting us there a little bit slower. Maybe I'm a cynic. Anyway, gang, I really appreciate you guys listening. It has been a crazy week in this country, and I think it's going to get much, much crazier. Get education. Get to understand the Constitution a little bit better. It's going to be key. It's going to be important for us to spend time educating ourselves and our family, and especially our children, on not just the Constitution, but contemporary documents. Find the Federalist Papers. Find some other stuff from other writings. There are so many contemporary documents that support the purpose of the Constitution. Understand why it was written. Understand how pissed off the Founding Fathers were against England and why. A lot of that stuff, Mark Twain said history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And it's rhyming for us right now. Now, I'm not saying we need to worry about going to fight against a tyrannical government. I absolutely hope that doesn't happen. I do not want to see war in this country. Civil war would be devastating for this country. But I do worry a lot about the future. I worry about our children. I worry about my children and my grandchildren, and the mess that's being left for them. And it is an absolute mess. It's crazy. No, I'm not crying. I got a stuffy throat, something or other. I do have allergies. I went camping over the middle of this last week. We went trudging through some of the cottonwood trees, and my goodness, it destroyed me. And I noticed I was driving back from my dad's place this evening, and they've been harvesting a little bit of the hay in the fields, and it's kind of getting to me. Friends, brothers and sisters. Oh, it sounds like almost sound like an evangelist. Brothers and sisters, thank you for spending your time listening to me, listening to the show. Nick and I absolutely appreciate your time. We know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate you spending time here on the show, listening to us. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, complaints probably won't get listened to, but you're welcome to leave any complaints. I think there's a problem with our email. So I'll give you my personal email. Please don't send me a bunch of crap like complaints. I'm just kidding. Constructive criticism, right? I'm going to leave you my personal email because, like I said, I think there's something wrong with our range-minded email. So my personal email is impracticaltactical, all one word, impracticaltactical, the number 17 at Gmail. If you disagree with what I said, that's cool. We can talk about it. Let's go through it. Again, I highly recommend that research the bills that have come up over the last little while. Research the Supreme Court's ruling the New York State Pistol and Rifle Association ruling. This stuff's important. Now, it's easy for me to say. I haven't read through all 131 pages. It's a lot, and I don't speak Supreme Court justice words very well. So I'll do what I can to digest it. Please take the time to do it. Like I said, it's with this Safer Communities Act. It's really easy to just get pissed off at the Republicans. I am pissed off at the Republicans that joined along with that bill, because the only compromise that took place is the compromisation of our rights. They're the only ones winning in this. I mean, the politicians, not just the Democrats, not the Republicans, but the politicians, the body politic itself. Read through that bill. Do some research on it. It helps to get educated. Don't just take my word for it. And don't take other talking heads' words for it. It's okay to do some research. Again, when I say get educated, I know we hammer so much the importance of getting good, solid training, and there are some amazing trainers out there. I would love to teach you some classes. Over at Independence, we got classes at Independence. If you don't live in the Boise area, or if you're not in Eastern Idaho, that's fine. Find somebody in your local area that's got some good content. Do what you can. Get training. Guys, we really appreciate you. I know I already said that, but I mean it. I really, really mean it. I appreciate the time that you spend with us. Be safe. Keep your head on a swivel and take somebody shooting. Good night. Guys, I really appreciate you listening to the Range Minded Podcast. Your time is valuable to us too. We know everybody's busy, and we really appreciate your time. If you liked what you heard tonight, go ahead and like and share it with your friends. If you have any comments or concerns, send them this way. It's all right. We can handle it. We're big kids. There's something wrong with our email, so I'm going to have you send it to my personal email. It's impracticaltactical, the number 17 at gmail.com. And if you have any suggestions for any guests or specific topics or stuff we can dig into, go ahead. Bring it on. We'd love to hear from you guys. Again, thanks for listening to the Range Minded Podcast.